Welcome to episode 81 of the 905er podcast. I'm Roland Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
The biggest challenge we'll face over the next half century or so is likely to revolve around climate change. Science in many cases has been established for decades now, and we're seeing the changes right here in the 905 region. There's 12% more precipitation in our region now than there was half a century ago, and temperatures have increased an average of 1.5 degrees. Now that might not sound like much, but those small averages reflect massive global changes. More weather extremes, more flooding, just as we saw it here in Halton in 2015. The speed with which change is happening is extremely rapid compared with any other time in global history. What used to happen over millennia is happening now in decades. For the last 2,000 years, temperatures remained largely stable, but in fact dropping gradually. Then the graph literally did a U-turn and started rising quickly, exactly at the point that industrialization took place and humans started burning carbon-based fossil fuels in huge quantities. So we need to be prepared, and we need to be taking serious action now for what climate change is going to bring. So it was very disappointing last week to learn of a sudden about-face by Milton Council on the issue of Highway 413. The various councils across Halton Region had up until now appeared to be making the right noises when it came to major environmental issues, and had been united in opposition to Highway 413. But in what was expected to be a routine vote, all of a sudden Milton's council reversed course and voted down a motion to reaffirm the council's opposition to the highway. This is the highway, in case anybody has forgotten, that multiple studies have said is not needed and will be disastrous for the environment. So what changed? And how can a council that was willing to declare a climate emergency in 2015 now vote in favour of yet another highway to join the three major expressways that already go through or around the municipality? To answer these and many other questions about how Halton and the 905 needs to be addressing these climate challenges and the changing work patterns we may be able to have post-COVID, we were joined this week by Lisa Kohler, Executive Director of Halton Environmental Network and Halton Climate Collective. Lisa has been working in the environmental not-for-profit sector for over 20 years and has been internationally recognised for her leadership in inspiring climate change initiatives. She is the orchestrator of Halton Climate Collective, a dedicated team of environmental leaders from across the region working in both municipal government, provincial agencies and environmental advocacy groups. Lisa was kind enough to give up time on her weekend to speak to us, and what followed was a fascinating conversation that you won't want to miss. Welcome, Lisa Kohler, to the 905er podcast. So, Lisa, you're the Executive Director of Halton Environmental Network and also work with Halton Climate Connection. The best way to start off is to describe exactly what those two organizations are and the work that they do within Halton Region for those people such as myself who are sadly ignorant about your work and would really like to learn.
Well, thank you, Joel and Roland, for having me this morning. I appreciate your time and having the opportunity to discuss the Halton Environmental Network and the Halton Climate Collective. So the Halton Environmental Network is a nonprofit organization that's been operating in the community of Halton since 2004. We like to say we educate, engage, partner, and act. We have a series of programs and initiatives that support local climate mitigation and adaptation for climate change. So all of our programs, whether that's our Halton Food program, working in community gardens, supporting local grown food and animating people's interest in that, or if it's through our Greening Sacred Spaces programs where we work with faith-based communities on adaptation and mitigation work on property. We also have our Halton Green Screens program, our Oakville Ready program, and we are the backbone agency of the Halton Climate Collective. And the Halton Climate Collective is a collective entity that has representatives and leaders from the region of Halton, the town of Oakville, the city of Burlington, the town of Halton Hills, the town of Milton, Conservation Halton, the University of Waterloo, Sheridan College, the Halton District School Board, and the Halton Catholic District School Board. Collectively, we come together and we work on transforming Halton into a low-carbon climate resilient community.
Just so our listeners have an understanding, where does your funding come from? Are you funded through the taxpayer, or are you funded through charity, nonprofit donations? Where's your funding coming from?
Thanks, Joel. Great question. So we actually receive a lot of our funding. I would say 90% of our funding is actually through grants. So we apply for a series of grants through many different agencies, and that's how our work is funded. So currently we have funds with the Ontario Trillium Foundation, through the Investment Readiness Program, through the Oakville Community Foundation. And then we work on other grants, animating other work with other entities, and that's how we receive funding. We do have a memo of understanding currently with the town of Halton Hills, and we do specific work with the town of Halton Hills on their low carbon transition strategy and their climate resiliency strategy. So we do have an MOU with that organization, as well as we are working with the region of Halton on a new MOU as well to drive some more action locally for our community.
To give a few examples of some of the work you've done as the Halton Environmental Network. You mentioned green screens and local food. Again, for someone who's should probably know but doesn't, what's a green screen? Other than those things that you do when you're making a film.
A great question, Roland. So Halton Green Screens is one of our programs. It's how we educate and inform and engage community through showing environmental documentaries. So we used to work with film.ca and others actually in community where we could all gather in person. And we would watch the documentary, and then we'd have a local speaker come in and kind of ground it in our own community. Obviously, since the pandemic, we've had to switch, and we do offerings now virtually. We actually have an event coming up with OFA, that's the Oakville Film Festival, and it's called First We Eat. It's around an individual that lives up in the far north in the Arctic, and it's all about her family actually only producing their own food and eating their own food on their land in the Arctic. So we partner with OFA, we partnered with other organizations such as Burlington Green, Oakville Green, GASP, etc., the CFUWs, and we've had movie nights as well. So it just depends on how we can animate it, but we've had many virtual screenings now, and we partner with numerous organizations just to spread the word to really not to spread the word, I would say to inspire individuals to act locally.
And in terms of your relationship with sort of municipal government, I guess you're kind of arm's length. You're able to be fairly independent of them, or are you sort of? I'm trying to think of the right word. Arm's length, but still there's a connection where you're not 100% independent, as say Burlington Green might be. Is that fair to say?
No, I would say we have our own board of directors. We have our own mission mandate that we operate under. So we are our own entity, but we do partner, and we authentically partner. And part of being a good partner is to listen and to work together. HEN is not interested in, really being siloed. We're really interested in having that authentic partnership, listening and looking for the best ways to really embrace and then transform our community. And so we are our own organization. We do delegations when we feel we need to. We have very authentic conversations with our partners and our municipalities. And that's really how we drive things forward. So we are our own organization. But like I say, we really do try to bring everybody to the table, have those conversations that are fruitful, so that we can really embed change.
On that note about working with municipalities to make the region more environmentally sustainable, I think I would like to take the conversation towards the town of Milton because they were in the news recently. Milton has kind of turned into a focal point within the region of I want to say the crossroads between environmental stewardship and economic progress, if you want. I guess those are the best two terms to put it. Most of what I'm talking about is something that our listeners are aware of is the Highway 413. We've spoken about this on numerous episodes, and we also presented at the Peel Community Climate Council on this topic a few months ago. The town of Milton kind of did an about face, or definitely diverged from the region on Highway 413. And when I'm talking, if nobody's aware, here's some background. So the region came out and voted to oppose Highway 413. They sent a message clearly they do not want it going through the region. People thought that was the end of the story until a councillor at the town of Milton put forward another motion, which he thought was just going to be kind of a fluff reinforcement of that motion, but from the town of Milton. And the town of Milton basically said, no, we're not going to endorse that. We're pretty much going to take the opposite stance, including Mayor Gord Krantz, who came out and said, basically that they want to reconsider the Highway 413. They think it might be a good idea. Lisa, what do you take away from that? What's the what's the Halton Environmental Network stance on this kind of about face of that policy?
Thanks, Joel. So just one thing I want to touch upon is when you're speaking about the economy and the environment, in actuality, I feel that they go hand in hand. We can't have a prosperous environment unless we have a prosperous economy, vice versa. So I think that that's something that, again, at hand, we try to elevate that conversation. A thriving environment creates a thriving economy. When it comes to the 413, to us, it's really not a complex issue at all. It's an issue that really is quite closed shut. So as we know, the federal government is doing an environmental assessment on the 413. It's $6 billion worth of taxpayer dollars. And to us, that doesn't make sense for infrastructure. What we could do with $6 billion, how we could create climate resiliency, how we could mitigate our impacts of climate change would be significant for our community. So in fact, pushing forward a 413 where we would be going over certain lands, wetlands, and other sensitive and ecologically sensitive areas, that's really not in anyone's best interest, as well as it's just a few kilometers from the 407, an underutilized highway. So instead of building yet another infrastructure that would pave over wetlands, that would have ecological challenges to our community, including additional greenhouse gas emissions with all those additional vehicles on the road, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So we are completely opposed to the 413. We were saddened to hear that Milton Council did do an about face, but I think again, this is in the hands of the federal government, and hopefully after their environmental assessment is conducted, it will be moot, and we can move on as a community without the 413.
What does it say to you? I mean, because the idea was, I'm trying to think off the top of my head all the municipal regional councils that came out in opposition to the 413 highway. So you had Halton, Peel, both coming out, and I'm kind of curious, like why is it that Milton felt that they had to about face? Like we hear they saw new information, and I'm thinking, what new information has come to light? Everything has been on the table so far. Like I don't know of any new studies or new piece of information that have really changed the dynamic of this conversation. Or do you know of something that we're not aware of?
I don't, Joel. So, subject matter experts have been looking into the 413 for quite some time now. All that research has been vetted. It has been gone through. It proves that the 413 isn't valid at all. It should be, as I say, we should really close that file and move on and invest those $6 billion in infrastructure that does have positive outcomes for our community. So I'm not really sure what the impetus was for the town of Milton and the councillors. It'd be a great question for maybe you to ask to one of them. Because we certainly don't see that. We don't see that there is an emergent need to readdress that issue. And like you say, the regional council had very much voted against the 413, as had many other municipal partners and such. So really, we don't see any benefit in our community for the 413.
My understanding was, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the regional vote on this against the 413 was pretty much unanimous, or there wasn't any particular group of councillors who were going a different direction from anybody else. Is that correct? That's
my understanding as well, Roland.
I mean, we've been over the question of the 413 on this podcast before, certainly, and when you say this has been looked at for some time, I mean, you're not kidding. I mean, we're talking almost decades it's been looked at, way back into the previous government, and the previous government came to the conclusion that it wasn't justified. Is this simply a matter of some councillors perhaps who are looking at things in kind of a 1980s, 1990s perspective rather than I keep talking about, maybe we can move towards a kind of post-commuter world. The Milton is thinking we're a commuter city. People who live in Milton aren't going to be working in Milton quite often. They're going to be going somewhere else to work. when we're talking about climate being carbon reduction, it has to come back to cars, obviously. Shouldn't our objective really be to radically realign the way we work to reduce those trips, basically?
Absolutely. So, I can't speak for the Milton Council. I can't speak to why they had an about face and why they're pushing this forward or advancing it. But, it is quite clear the 413 would have adverse effects on our climate. It would increase our greenhouse gas emissions. It would destroy ecologically sensitive areas of land. There is no benefit to it whatsoever. So, when we're talking about climate action, really it's looking at it holistically. And the 413 doesn't do that, as you mentioned. So really it's about getting people out of cars and creating complete communities where we're looking at other methods and ways to travel. As well as I really feel like we do need to put a different lens on our current environment, and that is around COVID. So we know with COVID that many people have been working from home, if not the majority of us. We know now we can work from home. We know we don't need to get in our cars. We know we don't need to travel into Toronto. We know that we can actually stay at home and prosper and do what we need to do. And I think that that's something that, COVID has been horrific. It's been catastrophic for our local community. But I would be saddened to think that we can't take some of the learnings that we've had from COVID and create a new path forward. And that is, looking at the complexities of COVID and looking at the complexity of climate. There's a lot of lessons that we've learned. And I think now we need to start embedding some of those lessons into current policies to advance things forward.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because that's something that actually, Roland and I have talked about on this podcast and offline numerous times, that it's the pandemic seems to be kind of one of those points in history that we're definitely going to have like a before and after. And we've talked about this in terms of transportation, like the commuter aspect of the 905 region. But there's also, it goes more beyond that. I mean, we've also talked about the housing shortage in this region, the runaway housing prices because of just supply and demand economics. We just don't have that. But the idea of, well, if you're able to free up all this office space and provide incentives for landlords to convert those office spaces into, condos or apartments or whatever have you, it's a benefit, because we have less, in theory, more demand on the market. Housing prices can start to come, I don't know about coming down, but at least regulate a bit more. And as you said, we aren't commuting it. We're not spending 2 hours, 3 hours commuting back and forth from Toronto to our homes here in the 905. And I'm interested. I'm surprised to see, bringing it back to the town of Milton Town Council kind of about face on this, that there just seems to be kind of that lack of vision, that lack of thinking of what happens once we all have our second dose of vaccine, right? It's this notion of, everything's just going to go right back to the way it was before. And I'm thinking, I kind of don't want it to. There's some things about before COVID that I'm not looking forward to. Long commutes in my car is one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a society, learning from challenges that are presented with you always has fruitful outcomes. So, I agree with you, Joel. I don't want to go back to business as normal. I want to go back to business as better. And I think that future is exciting, to be honest with you. But I think we do need to be aware, and we need to be mindful of that path forward and how it could look. And I think engaging our community and our citizens in, what were some of the benefits, absolutely address the challenges, but look at the opportunities. Currently, I don't know how much we're really looking at that. And I think that has great potential. And, we're really lucky to live in Halton. We have really bright people that live here. I have the fortune to talk to many of them every day. And I think a path forward for Halton is absolutely exciting if we can put proper policies in place, and we all want to build back better.
Now, moving on to in many ways, a related subject, another controversial subject, again, connected with transportation, ultimately, transportation of goods rather than people, is the story of Milton Rail Hub, which has certainly been a very hot topic in Milton itself. And again, it was also something that the region has been very clearly opposed to. And I believe you have also been on the record kind of opposing the hub. I guess, first of all, let's speak about the hub and what it is and where it is and what the intentions are. And I guess the question that leads on from that is, if we are trying to get away from cars and trucks, and have efficient transportation, isn't a rail hub actually kind of the environmental thing to do? We're just being joined by Joel's dog here, which is always a welcome guest. Actually, I think it's the first time he's been a guest on the podcast. But
yeah, Roland, great question. And you've kind of hit this one on the head. The intermodal rail hub, it's complex. I'm the first one to say intermodal hubs, there's benefits to them 100%. The issue is complex because it will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as a country. And that's a benefit. We want that, right? Moving things on rail instead of a diesel truck, there wouldn't be an environmentalist that didn't agree that that's the right path forward. Mm-hmm. But we do oppose the CN intermodal rail hub, and that's for a very it's just in the wrong location. I can't say it enough. When you look at the environment, you have to look at it as a system, as a whole. You can't look at it. You can't parcel one section away from the other. And the intermodal rail hub, the location that it's at, is incredibly detrimental to our community. The health impacts alone should be reason for all of us to stand up in opposition to it. So again, really, we're looking at a hub that will run 7 days a week, 365 days a year, over 800 trucks. So that's 1,600 trips per day, every single day, that's spewing particulate matter. And we're talking about a PM of roughly about 2.5 is what we're looking at. And that pollution, that particulate matter will cause significant health impacts to some of our most vulnerable populations: children, seniors, people with COPD, asthma, etc. That hub location currently is going to be in our community that's surrounded by over 12 schools, a hospital, 2 long-term care residents. It's just, to us, it's a no-brainer. It's the wrong location. Again, I think if you look at this system as a whole, there are better places to put intermodal system where the current location is not beneficial for our environment or the health and safety and well-being of our community.
I want to play a bit of devil's advocate here, mostly because I know that CN, my understanding of the CN Rail Hub, that the CN bought the property that is proposed for this hub some time ago. We're talking decades ago. At the time that they purchased it, it was just land. It was just, people thought it was just land literally in the middle of nowhere. Over time, the town of Milton has allowed its borders to basically encroach up onto this property. They're now, the neighborhoods are bordering this property line. I'm kind of puzzled by this case because the town of Milton, it's not as if they said, "Oh, we had no idea that this was going to be here." Like the CN is surprising us with this rail hub. They've known for decades that CN bought it with its stated purpose of one day we might want to build a hub here. We might want to put tracks down here. This is why we're purchasing this land now. For the town of Milton to kind of come out and say, "Oh, it's going to be harmful," like you allowed the municipality built up to that. You could have zoned it for industrial development. You could have put warehouses and manufacturing jobs there. Instead, you said you want schools and housing. What are CN's options now? Because CN, it's not like CN was being. I thought my understanding is CN has been pretty transparent on their intentions for this land for a number of years. Just, do you have any comment on that kind of analysis?
A couple. So, I'm kind of one of those people that look at shoulda, coulda, woulda. And to be honest with you, the cards have been dealt. This is where we're at. Our community has grown by this. We have a regional official plan. We have to comply with it. It comes from the province, full stop. So, when we're told we have to grow by X amount, our communities have to look like this. We have to comply with it. We don't have a choice. So, again, CN, right intentions with an intermodal hub. Good decision. Excellent decision. We need intermodal hubs throughout Canada, but it's not good in our community in this current location. It's a fluid system. Things have changed. It's evolved. Let's look at what we have now. What we have is 12 schools, I don't want a child in Milton getting asthma or having a significant health impact that causes cognitive delays because of the pollutants in the air. Like, that's just the bottom line here. We're talking about health and well-being, full stop. And I think any company that has a corporate sustainable responsibility to our community would have to look at that and say, it's egregious, let alone the seniors. Like, seniors, their health impact, COPD, it afflicts more seniors than many illnesses. I just feel like, really, let's just look at the situation in its current state. And the situation in its current state is the CN Intermodal Rail Hub in its current location is adverse for our community of Halton. We need to stop it. We need to move on. We need to look at a better location, full stop. That's it. Are there things that we could do to green a intermodal transportation hub? 100%. Could we have electric trucks instead of diesel trucks at the location? Could we be putting in EV chargers for diesels? Maybe. Could we be looking at sequestration values? Could we be looking at scrubbers? Could we be could? Like, there's lots of things we could do to make it greener, but in its current state, absolutely 100% bad location, bad time. Let's move on. Lick our wounds. Let's find another location. Let's get on with it. Like, Joel,
just to sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Just to give the listeners a little bit of history of this. I mean, this as long as Gord Krantz has been mayor of Milton, this is actually the first thing he did as a youngster entering politics was fight the CN Rail Hub back in around the 2000. Actually, I think he'd already been in politics a long time by then. So it's it went away and it's come back again now. I guess the $1 million question really is probably quite literally $1 million or many $1 million questions is, if not Milton, then where? Because the unfortunate point of a rail hub is it has to be pretty near people. I mean, obviously nobody wants this on their doorstep, but it has to be near enough to people that it can do its job, which is to get goods from rail into businesses. So where else do you think could it go?
It's a great question, Roland. And, I think together we have solutions. I think we're creative as a community. I think we could look at this and evolve it. I don't think there's anything stopping us from doing that. So again, I really wish that, as a community, collectively, we could come together. We could look at a solution that would support a healthy environment and community well-being and health and safety. But in order to do that, we all need to acknowledge that the current state and where it currently is located is the wrong choice. And then really we have to go through a process of looking for another location. And again, embedding maybe something a little bit more sustainable and resilient is a path forward. Again, we do know that diesel trucks are being transformed. We know many companies down south have been purchasing electric trucks and getting rid of diesel. Why can't that be part of our conversation? Why can't Halton lead that? Why can't we put in a charging station for trucks and we start doing that at that location? What's stopping us? Again, there is workarounds here, but it's going to take energy, effort, and work to get there. And it's not going to be easy. And it's going to cost millions of dollars more to transform it. But like I said, the bottom line is currently in its current iteration, this just doesn't work. And I'm not going to say this location would be better, Roland, because frankly, it's holistic. We have to look at the system as a whole. We're not doing that currently.
You've added a point that I hadn't properly considered before, is that, as usual, we're assuming this is the only way something can be. The trucks are big and dirty and they spew diesel. Whatever they're carrying can be spraying around in every direction as well. And, these are big, heavy industries, and it's difficult to not have a degree of impact. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a point that I will admit hadn't occurred to me before in a lot of ways. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. Moving on to a related subject. Well, it's kind of related, kind of not related, but it does tie into this story quite nicely, and that is that the region of Halton is now going into its regional official plan review process. It seems like yesterday that they did the previous one. I haven't been in Canada that long, and I remember that whole thing. And there's been quite it's one of the things we notice, and one of the things we're trying to overcome as this podcast is the lack of attention that some really important regional issues get. That although the regional official plan is a big deal, it's not the kind of big deal that it tends to be at a municipal level. And I'm not entirely sure why that is, because perhaps you could explain to people what a regional official plan is, how that interacts with the other levels of government, and why it's really important that we get it right.
Thanks, Roland. I'm not an expert, in regional official plans, but I understand the function and the form of them. And that's essentially the province comes out with a growth plan, and that gets sent down to the municipalities. The municipalities have to grow within the mandated plan that has been provided by the province. So currently, there is a projection for the community of Halton. We do have to increase our population as well as our places to work. So that is currently the work of the region. They have to now create a regional official plan that complies with the numbers set forth by the province of Ontario. So the regional official plan will tell us where we grow, how we grow, and what our community will look like in 20 to 30 years from now. In my mind, this is the most important and urgent issue that we have in the community of Halton, full stop. We need citizens to get involved, to look at the regional official plan, to read the different scenarios and to determine what scenario they want for our community. This is about our kids. This is about our future. This is about the landscape of our community. Yeah, Joel.
I something that we've talked about is just the contrast between like kind of a myopic vision of our cities. Like too often, we've been hearing in definitely in Burlington, in Hamilton, as well as Peel, Mississauga, Brampton. We hear about this. Oh, we don't want high rise. We don't want to look like Toronto. We don't. How many levels off a high rise should we not have? And that seems to be the discussion that people have in mind when we talk about development in the region. What we've discussed so far, the previous two topics, we're talking about, I think, a more grander vision of development within the region. Because again, going back to the point that you made previously about trying to partner environmental sustainability with economic progress, we need to start considering that. We've also, I touched upon earlier, the need for more affordable housing. I find that when we have these discussions, we have them in silos, right? Housing is one thing, environment's another, the economy is another. And kind of one of the reasons why Roland and I put this together is that we want to start tearing down those silos. These aren't what you can't fix one housing's. You can't build more houses and say, well, we've solved the housing problem. No, you've also probably displaced possible jobs. That's land that could have been developed for economic development, or say, oh, we're going to put in a highway to promote economic change. Well, no, now you're tearing up viable farmland and the whatnot. What is you? I'm going to give you the open table here to kind of say, like, what's Halton Environment Network's kind of ideal solution to this, ideal vision of what would you like to see Halton? And I guess, let's broaden it up, the entire 905 region. How would you like to see us progress over the next 5-10 years?
Thanks, Joel. Wow, great question. One that I'm looking to answer.
You have 30 seconds, go.
Okay. There's two things really, to me, it's succinct, it's cohesive, and that is we need two things. We need harder urban boundaries, full stop, done, and we need green development standards, full stop, done. We get those two things on the books. Boy, oh boy, are we talking about a resilient and climate-ready community. That's what we need. That's what we need to drive forward. That's what we should be doing as a community. Again, I love what you're talking about silos, because, a healthy, prosperous economy equals a healthy, prosperous environment equals a complete community for all residents. It's not siloed at all. In fact, it's cohesive. The only way it will work is when all of those spheres come together into one circle, and that's a complete community. So again, we're so lucky where we live in Halton. We have amazing farmland. That farmland isn't just growing food that's sustaining us, it's sequestering carbon. That soil sequesters more carbon than so many other resources. That's a resource. That is something tangible. The minute we start putting sprawling homes is the minute we have problems in our community. It changes our whole ecosystem. It changes our greenhouse gas emissions. And look at climate change, it's here. I'm just going to ground truth it for a moment. We know it's getting wetter, windier, and wilder, 1000%. We've been tracking it. We know the impacts. By keeping sprawl happening, all we're doing is amplifying that impact. So boy, oh boy, do we ever have an opportunity in our community to really say together as a community, hard urban boundaries, green development standards, that's our path forward. That's an opportunity. Let's get it done.
Yeah, you raised excellent points. There's something that we've had on a few episodes ago. We had on the director of Halton Conservation on to talk about how the province was rolling back the responsibilities of the conservation authorities in Ontario. At the same time, we were talking about how the Minister of Municipal Affairs, Steve Clark, was kind of handing out municipal zoning orders like it was candy. There was at the time there was talk about in Pickering transforming wetlands into warehouses, and he was using that. We're talking about doing a regional plan development, but that shadow hangs overhead. The region can say, hey, we want to make more green space, more parkland. We want to have denser neighborhoods, whatever have you. But at the same time, we have a government that the minister has a longstanding history of just saying, yeah, great, you have a plan. I'm overriding it with my minister zoning order because I want to put in a warehouse for Amazon, or I want to put in a film studio on this land. What do you think? Do you think that makes the regional plan kind of a pointless endeavor at that point, or is this something that maybe the municipalities need to start fighting back more against?
Really good question. So, again, the regional official plan, we have to do it. We have to comply with the province, full stop. So we have to undertake this process, and we have to put forward the best path forward for our community. So people do need to be engaged, regardless if an MZO is hanging over us or not. By not being part of the conversation, you're not being part of a solution. So, it's time for people to lean in here and get involved in the regional official plan. MZOs are a really slippery slope, and it's a huge concern, to be really honest with you. I think that moving forward, I'd really love the province to be more mindful around MZOs and how they're applying them and why they're applying them. And again, it needs to be looked at holistically. It's bad policy, it's bad process and bad procedure. And that's just the bottom line. And when a community of citizens come together and say, this is the path we want our community to be complete. We want hard urban boundaries, and we want a clean and prosperous economy. If the residents are saying that, I would hope that all politicians would listen to those residents and make sure that they're amplifying that voice and making sure that that's what's happening in community. In fact, I would say that's almost their responsibility, Joel, wouldn't you? Like, as a politician, shouldn't we be listening to our citizens? And if our citizens are saying, look, this is our path forward, we've all been involved in this process, in this regional official plan, I would hope that they would reflect on that and be very mindful with what their citizens are saying.
I also just want to add in one caveat to my previous statement that about MZOs. There has been talk about using ministerial zoning orders in regards to the Highway 413. There's talk about doing that, but with the trade-off of, we're going to expand Greenbelt, so adding so many acres of Greenbelt north of the existing Greenbelt boundary. That's to me that's just, it just shows like you can just shift the Greenbelt. There's nothing stopping us from doing that, building a highway, and then saying, okay, well, it's another 10 years time. Okay, let's shift the boundaries a little bit more, and we'll just keep adding until we hit Lake Superior or Lake Huron on the northern part of the province. That's just my little caveat there.
And Joel, if I can speak to that for a second,
go ahead.
We do have an environmental assessment currently on the 413 by the federal government. Let's wait and see how that plays out, because you can't, once you pave over a wetland, you can never ever regain that ecological benefit, full stop. Like, it's gone, and you can't pick it up and put it somewhere else. That's just not how it works. So that's really to say, we're just going to move, it's tick for tat. That's not how ecological processes or systems work. And again, we have a lot of really bright people that understand that. So I find that almost offensive when those conversations occur in community. It's like, once you pave over paradise, it's gone, like, full stop. You can't bring back the land that had that ecological benefit. Yeah, you can do remediation, but it's just that, it's remediation. It never gets back to that ecological value that is not only helping our environment, but it's helping us as humans. It's
and this
absurd.
And this maddening to me argument that, oh well, we'll build on this bit of a green belt and we'll give you another bit. It's like that's the whole point, is that you can't, if you do that, you still lost land forever. You can't. And I grew up outside London, and I was surrounded by, I think it was one of the first green belts in the world, if not the first. And today, that green belt, the areas that are designated green belt in 1970, the year I was born, are exactly the same. It's amazing when looking around here, where everything changes so quickly, and we're very different countries, very, very different countries. But despite all the change that's gone in during 50 years of my lifetime, those fields that were farmland in 1970 are the same farm today. And that's the point. That's the way it has to be if it's going to work. And yeah, that really has to be a message that people take on board. There's one final issue. We're coming right up on our time here. One issue I wanted to dive into, and that is shortly after the last municipal elections, I'm not sure if every council in Halton did it, but certainly Burlington did, certainly Oakville did, was to declare a climate emergency. Now, which seems like a great thing, I'm very happy they did. Do you think, given those declarations, that the cities have subsequently shown that there's real teeth in those declarations, that they weren't just kind of window dressing, to put it bluntly? Or do you think, or do you think it was simply window dressing, and that it doesn't necessarily signify a great change in mentality on these municipalities' part?
Roland, great question. So HEN was involved in all, I'm happy to report we have 6 climate emergency declarations in our community. So we have all 4 lower tier municipalities, the region of Halton, as well as we have the Halton District School Board. We supported the students in the first ever student-led climate emergency declaration. So, we should be proud as a community to declare that we have 6 climate emergency declarations. How we can apply those declarations and how we can embed change is different per municipality. So I think we're seeing great progress in Oakville, Burlington, and in Halton Hills. Halton Hills is actually leading some incredible transformation, including a retrofit program, the first of its kind in our community. So I think depending on how the municipality wants to apply that climate emergency, it is, they have a mechanism now, they have a tool. They didn't have that before. So how they leverage that mechanism or that tool is really up to them. And again, we're seeing some really lean in, and we're seeing others that maybe aren't leaning in enough. And we're seeing some with a path forward, and we're seeing some that are just trying to get on the path and trying to formulate it and try to put that lens on. And I think that's what the climate emergency should do. It should put a lens of climate on everything. Again, economics, economic development, complete communities, growth plans, transportation nodes, all of those things. The climate lens should be applied to everything. That's what we could do. And if we do that, if we create that cohesive, holistic path forward, we will prosper. I think Mark Carney, he just released a great book. He elevates that conversation to a level in which I could never do, as well as our own Treasury Department and the work of Mr. Zenos. Again, he shows how we can actually embed a climate budget into everything that we're doing. So the true cost of climate is added at the inception, and looking at farmlands or the greenbelt and actually looking at the true ecological benefits and the carbon mitigation that's derived just by having that space. That's all needs to be embedded here. Again, those climate emergencies, that is a mechanism and a tool that we could really use to create an incredible community for our children and grandchildren.
I could ask more questions. Joel, do you have a final question you want to go with there?
No, I think I just want to underscore kind of what you were saying there, Lisa, that, and what Roland was saying, that I thought when the municipality started declaring climate emergencies, I thought it was a great, bold statement, and I was really proud of it. My take is that that boldness has turned into a bit more meekness in recent years. I haven't seen too many municipalities take the steps forward that I would have liked that they showed when making those statements. I like that Halton Hills is talking about retrofit, but I'm surprised like there's no urgency to retrofit existing municipal infrastructure, community centers, hockey arenas, that kind of thing to make them more environmentally sustainable or carbon neutral.
They're doing that actually, Joel. I have to step in right there. So we're seeing many community centers actually doing that. We're seeing actually the corporate energy plans out of most municipalities, all of the municipalities actually in our community, are really being advanced. So those things are actually happening, just to let you know. We are seeing that embedded right now. So I just, sorry to stop you right there, but just to let you know, there's many community centers now and a lot of electrification of fleet vehicles for our municipalities now. And I think just to be really, I think one thing we have to acknowledge is, we've been in the middle of a pandemic. Do I wish that we've made more advances on climate? 1,000%. 1,000%. It's, the clock's ticking. We don't have much time. In fact, we're out of some time here. But, we've been thrusted into this COVID world. And, I think our municipalities have done a very good job keeping us safe and sound. But now to keep us safe and sound, now with COVID and the vaccines being rolled out, it's now time to put climate back on the level of urgency, and we all need to advance the climate action plans, and we need to advance our climate inventories. We need to really measure, track, and then start mitigating. That's what we need to do. Let's track it, let's measure it, let's implement the change. That's where we're at, and let's put the same urgency that we put on COVID onto climate.
That is an excellent.
That's what I was going to say. I think we're going to end off on that. That's a high note.
Yeah. So thanks so much, Lisa Kohler, for joining us today. Really enjoyed this conversation, and all the very best with all those future things that we hope will come very soon from all levels of government, not just in Halton, but across the 905 and across Canada. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Roland, for the opportunity. I really enjoyed the conversation today. So thanks so much.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.